Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're doing something a little different. We're going to dive into a contemporary Korean Christian sermon and really pull it apart to see what it's saying to people of faith right now. It's all about its big ideas, its warnings, and this really intense choice it lays out between two very different ways to live.
So let's get right into it. The whole sermon, everything, hinges on this one question. It's not just some nice theme, The pastor presents it as the core choice, the one that every single person is making every single day, whether they even know it or not. It's pretty high stakes.
All right, Section 1, a world of light and dark. To really get what this sermon is about, you've got to understand the world it paints. And let me tell you, it's not a gray area. It's a spiritual battlefield, right? A constant tug-of-war between two opposing absolute forces.
And this is what that battlefield looks like. It's a straight-up binary choice. The pastor basically lays out two teams. On one side, you have the light, Christ, truth, transparency, love. And on the other, the darkness, the world, secrecy, sin. The really big idea here, the main takeaway, is that there's no in-between. Every single thing you do or believe, it lands in one of these two columns, period. No gray area allowed.
Okay, Section 2, the dangers of the dark. So we've got the big picture, this epic battle, but what does the darkness actually look like today? Like in the real world? The sermon gets pretty specific about the threats, and here they are. The pastor points to three major things, and what's interesting is that he's not talking about some abstract ancient evil, he's pointing to very modern problems. He's basically saying the battleground today is right here, in things we've created, our tech, our ideas about love, and even our need for secrecy.
So this first one is a really fascinating concept he calls the digital messiah. And this isn't your typical, you spend too much time on your phone kind of warning. No, this goes way deeper. He's talking about a future where technology gets so advanced, it starts to look and act like God.
Yeah, check out this quote. This is the core of his fear, right here. He's saying, look, digital tech is going to get so good it'll make the blind see, the deaf hear, things that sound like literal miracles. And people, they're going to hail it as the Messiah. The danger, from his perspective, is that this is a trap, a way to trick people into trading eternal life for a technological illusion of salvation. Okay, so after that pretty big idea about technology, the sermon shifts gears. It gets a lot more personal. The next big danger he identifies is that the very idea of love is getting twisted. He argues that our modern culture is messing with the definition and that this new definition is pulling people into the darkness. He gets really specific here, critiquing what he calls queer theology and other modern ideas about relationships. And he's not presenting these as just, a different way of looking at things. In his sermon, these ideas are framed as being a fundamental part of the darkness, something that should be hidden from the light and actively fought against. And that brings us to the third danger he points out. This one drills down from the cultural to the really personal. It's all about secrecy. The argument is simple. If you feel the need to hide things, that's a giant red flag that you're walking in darkness. And he makes this super practical. He's talking about things like hiding your phone's location, or having private conversations you don't want anyone else to see. In the world of this sermon, that's not just about privacy. It's presented as proof, direct evidence that you're doing something secretive, something that you're ashamed of and trying to hide from the light.
All right, Section 3, the commandment of light. So we've heard the diagnosis, right? All the problems of the dark. Now the sermon shifts to the solution. And it's really interesting because it all boils down to one single core commandment.
He calls it the new commandment. And the idea is to take all the complexity of trying to live a good, faithful life and just simplify it. It all comes down to one guiding principle, one action that's supposed to define everything else.
And this is it. Love one another. This is the absolute foundation of the solution he offers. It's not enough to just believe in the light. You have to live in it. And how do you do that? Well, according to this teaching, the number one way is by actively loving your brother, loving other people. That action itself is abiding in the light.
So Section 4, how to live in light. Okay, love one another sounds great, but what does that actually mean day to day, right? How do you do it? Well, the sermon doesn't just leave it hanging as a nice idea. It lays out a very clear, very practical roadmap.
And here are the 4 steps he gives for living a life of light. First, you got to master yourself. That means rejecting laziness and always chasing worldly pleasure. Second, purify your relationships. This one's tough. It means ending relationships with people who are pulling you into the dark. Third, judge by faith's standard. So you stop measuring what's right and wrong by what the world says is successful, and you start using the gospel as your ruler. And finally, number 4, you live with full transparency. Basically, live your life in such a way that you'd have zero to hide, from God or from anybody else.
Okay, last section, the ultimate stakes. So we've got the problem, we've got the solution, we've got the roadmap, and now this is where the sermon really raises the stakes. This isn't just about living a good life here on earth. He ends by talking about the eternal consequences, the forever outcome of this one choice. And according to this pastor, there are only 2 possible outcomes. No third option, no do-overs. The path you walk in this life, he says, leads directly to one of 2 totally permanent, eternal places.
And this chart lays it out in stark contrast. On one side, a life in the light gets you eternal life in a beautiful heaven, a reward for a life of purpose. But a life in the darkness? That leads to being cast out into what he calls outer darkness, where you're left with nothing but eternal regret.
This final quote is, well, it's pretty intense. He says you'll be cast out to weep and gnash your teeth. And then he asks, why? He says you'll be gnashing your teeth at yourself, calling yourself a fool for how you lived your life. The real pain, he suggests, isn't just some punishment. It's the crushing regret of knowing you wasted your one life.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. What we've seen is a sermon that puts a very clear, very urgent choice on the table. It calls for a life of absolute transparency and love as the only defense against what it sees as a growing darkness. And it leaves us all with a pretty challenging question, doesn't it? In a world that values privacy and is full of complexity, what does it actually mean to live a completely visible life?